All right, welcome to another episode of GLP's 10 out of 10. This is where we ask different designers from around the globe the same 10 questions. Some are inspirational, some are educational, some are off the wall, and some are just plain fun. Today we have with us multifaceted designer, New York-based Mike Baldassari. Mike is an award-winning and Tony and Emmy nominated lighting designer. He spans film, broadcast, television, theater, concert touring. Mike even has a Roscoe Lux gel named after him, Baldassari Blue, which is R381. Mike has worked on projects such as on Broadway, Children of a Lesser God, First Date, As Long as We Both Laugh, and Holler If You Hear Me. He has designed film credits for Rock of Ages starring Tom Cruise and the movie musical Nine. In concert touring, Alice in Chains, Fish, Neil Young, and many others. TV credits include David Letterman's Netflix special, U2, Bruce Springsteen, Carrie Underwood's Saturday Night Live, Late Night with Seth Meyers, U2's Top of the Rock performance on the premiere of The Tonight Show, where Mike was nominated for an Emmy, comedy broadcasts for Joe Rogan, Jay Romano, Dana Carvey, to name just a few. He has theatrical touring credits and international projects that include Monty Python's Spamalot, Man of La Mancha, The Music of Johnny Cash, Spider-Man Live, Beauty of the Beast in Europe, Blast 2 in Japan, and Cabaret in Paris. That's fantastic. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
So, all right, so let's get to the 10 out of 10 questions, man.
Okay.
So what was your first job as a designer?
My first job, I'll say, in New York City as a designer, because I started when I was in high school doing stuff. But my first job in New York City, I did a little tiny show in an asphalt plant that you can still see from the FDR Drive. So it was on the way on the Upper East Side, and it was a little tiny show called Boogie Woogie and Booker T. And the funny thing about that is they did a taping for Lincoln Center, and the Lincoln Center Library. And recently I was there with my daughter who loves to go, and she loves to watch old shows and stuff like that. She's approaching college now. And we looked it up, and sure enough, it's in there. But it says, in the comments section, it says something like, good taping, power goes out in the middle of Act 2. So that was my first New York show.
There you go. That's pretty cool. So what was your most Spinal Tap or / embarrassing moment on the show that you're willing to tell us about?
Okay, I have two for you. The first one is I was doing the Broadway musical First Date, and I was lighting Zach Levi and Krista Rodriguez, and they were sitting, and they're supposed to be frozen. And I put a couple of Sharpies onto Zach Levi. He's supposed to be frozen, right? So he was this bright thing, and the director says, "Can you make him a little brighter?" And I said, "Sure." So I added a few more Sharpies. And the next thing you know, I'm looking at him, and there's smoke coming out of his hair. So I quickly turned it off. Yeah. I was wearing a baseball hat. I went down there. I profusely apologized, and I said, "Zach, I'm so sorry." And I took my hat off. I said, "Look, it's happened to me a few times, but I'm really sorry." And all. He was totally cool about it. So the other Spinal Tap moment that I have that unfortunately also has to do with burning things is I, for a number of years, for Jules Fisher and Peggy Eisenhower, I was their lighting supervisor on Christmas Carol that was at Madison Square Garden. So at the theater at Madison Square Garden. Mm-hmm. And it was, it's anybody who ever saw it, it's an enormous production. And I was doing some of my cue notes. And the other thing is that building is just so big that sitting at the back of the theater and doing my cue notes, you're like a block away. Mm-hmm. So you can't really always tell what's going on stage. But I was just kind of quickly trying to go through my notes, and there was a drop in, and for a different scene, there was these 6 lights that were shadow projectors that were just like a 1K work light essentially that made shadows. But this drop was in that they had just had repainted. So you can imagine, this is a drop that's like probably was 50 feet wide at least, and probably, 25 feet tall, that had just been repainted. So you can imagine what that cost.
Yeah.
And I hear somebody come out from one of the houses yelling, "Turn it off, turn it off." I went into the wrong queue. These six projector lights came on, and they burned 6 holes in this brand new drop.
Ooh.
So it was totally my mistake. And I had to profusely apologize to Tony for burning holes in his drops. So I'm not proud of it.
That one sticks around for a while.
Yeah, that wasn't so good.
Okay, so question number 3. What's the best advice anybody's given you, either professional or otherwise?
Hands down, the best advice I ever got. I was in a doctor's office, and there was a Forbes magazine sitting on the table, and there was an interview with Alice Cooper. And I said, "What is Alice Cooper doing in Forbes magazine?" So I had to read it while I was sitting there. And one of the things that I read in there that he said was, "I made more money in real estate than I ever made in the music business." And that just, kind of set a light bulb off in my head. And so that led to me investing in real estate, and which I have done from the moment I could. I started when I was 25, and that has been absolutely the best advice I ever got. And the other advice I got after Tony Walton had forgiven me burning the 6 holes in his drop was, I asked him about buying a second home for an investment. And he said to me, we bought a house back in the early 70s in Sag Harbor. And he said, the beauty of it is in flush times we enjoyed it, and in lean times we rented it out. And I think for our business, I think you have to get involved in real estate at some point in our business. So that is absolutely, hands down, the best advice I got was the Alice Cooper in Forbes magazine.
That's cool. That's good. On a professional level, what is your proudest achievement?
I have to say that I co-designed Cabaret with Peggy Eisenhower. She asked me to join her on it. And that by far, that led to a more than 20-year relationship with that show. It has taken me around the world. And I think that Cabaret is one of the great American musicals. And so to be involved for that amount of time with something that is that poignant, and I think it's as fresh this minute as it was the day that it started. And so to be able to do that and then that production was with these 2 guys that nobody knew at the time, named Sam Mendes and Rob Marshall. So Sam and Rob, we did this thing, and they turned into Sam Mendes and Rob Marshall. So that was a groundbreaking production that we got to do all over the world.
That's fantastic.
So on that alone, I think I have to defer to that.
That's great. That's a great story. So when you're not working, which you do quite often, what do you do in your downtime?
Well, look, to be very honest, on my downtime, I try to spend every minute I can with my family, because that is one of the parts, we all know that about our business, is how much time it takes us away from our family. So in the pandemic, one thing that I learned how to do is I have a neighbor, we're out east right now. I have a neighbor who's a commercial fisherman. So I've run into him, and he said that the fish prices, with no restaurants open and schools closed, all that kind of stuff, fish prices have really taken a nosedive. So I said, well, I'll buy some fish from you. And so I've learned how to fillet fish and that kind of stuff. So that's
Awesome.
been my pandemic. Come out the other end. What's your new skill?
There you go. Bring it all back full circle.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. So in all of your travels, what's the best venue that you've worked in?
Well, I have to break that down a couple of different ways. So I would say New York City, hands down, you have to put in there Radio City, Carnegie Hall. I did, in addition to other things, I did 20 of the CBS upfronts at Carnegie Hall. And certainly Madison Square Garden. It's Madison Square Garden. For Broadway, I've done 3 productions at Studio 54, so I think I have to say that's one of my favorite theaters. Concerts, I would say certainly Red Rocks, I'm sure is on a lot of people's list. The Gorge at George Washington. I have to say Garden State Art Center, because I live in New Jersey. We got to stick together. Television, 30 Rock. You know, it's really cool to work at 30 Rock. Anybody who works there will tell you that. In film, I have to say Shepperton Studios, where we did 9 in London, just because of the incredible history that's there. And then New Jersey, I have to say, New Jersey Performing Arts Center, NJ-PAC in Newark, does not get enough credit. I think it's one of the best venues in the world. You know, I feel like I've been all over the planet, and that right there in Newark, New Jersey, is absolutely, NJ-PAC is one of the best, you know, venues in the world. And like I said, Garden State Arts Center, because it's a Jersey thing.
Right. That's great. Great local shout out, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So in this time of quarantine, what's the one album or artist that you couldn't do without?
I will say we stumbled across, going back to the Jersey centricness, Bruce Springsteen on XM radio, From His Home to Yours. We really love listening to his comments and observations about what's going on these days, and you know how he's processing all of the events going on in the world, and funneling it into the music that he picks. It's really cool, and he's a Jersey guy, so Jersey guys like me, we stick together.
Very cool. That's good. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give a teenage Mike Baldassari?
Do something else.
But invest in real estate.
Oh, yeah. Invest in real estate. But, you know, I think it's very difficult to convey to people how difficult this business is. You know, and here I am, you know what, I'm flattered when you introduced me with that. It's a very impressive list. But that list didn't just happen. You know, like I had a hustle for all of those jobs. And here I am, you know, 33 years out of college, and I feel like it's still a hustle, you know, and I think that's very difficult to convey. I think as a young person, you know, there is a safety mechanism of being, you know, kind of young and stupid. And I was the stupidest by far, you know, and I do think there's a safety mechanism there, you know, and I've always said this: if you wait until you think you can do something, you'll never do anything.
Right.
So I wish somebody had, you know, beaten my head a little bit more about how tough it was going to be.
All right. So if you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with one person, present or past, who would it be?
I have to say, hands down, John Lennon. First off, the guy was 40 when he died.
Yeah.
And it's like the amount of stuff that guy did. The other person who also, you know, when I turned 40, I kind of looked at like, what did some other people do at this point? You know, Martin Luther King Jr. was 39 when he was killed. You know, and you're like, you look at those two guys and you're like, wow, you know, it's like,
right.
I haven't done anything. You know, we look at what those folks accomplished. That was the two that stuck out. When I was 40 and I kind of did that observing, or, you know, did a little self-reflection.
All right. So our final question, Mike, your country's called you up for the Olympics, winter or summer. What sport are you going to compete in?
All right. Well, nothing involved getting cold. I can tell you that. When I was in college, I had the best summer job in the world. I worked for a women's softball team sponsored by a beer company. And that was an eye-opening experience with some really incredible athletes. I ended up working like as an announcer and an assistant coach, but I also kept the beer cold, you know. So I would be More than happy to reprise my role as the guy who keep in the dugout, keeping the beer cold.
Keeping the beer cold. Perfect.
Yeah. But I don't mean that. I'm just saying that as a joke. I have really nothing but the highest respect for the people who train, how they train and get to that level is very, very impressive.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you, man. I
My pleasure.
appreciate it. It's always great to see you.
Same here.
And be well.